Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the only podcast where we share the secrets the wealthy know to build generational wealth. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about a horse called Asset. This episode was originally intended to be for members-only content, but we talked a lot in this about doctors and the complex financial world that they navigate. And, over the years that we've worked with business owners and especially a lot of doctors, Bob has really done a great job of coming up with analogies that help to make sense of a fairly complicated scenario. We wanted to make this available to everybody, not put it behind our membership wall. So I hope you enjoy this episode where we talk about a horse called Asset.
He slept at the office. He's just grinding. And there's two physicians that we know that we've had conversation with where that's the case. Sometimes it's because they got themselves in a difficult situation, so they have to dig themselves out. But what we're saying is yes, hard work is great, but working hard and working smart is where there's a lot of power. Right. So there are structural things that you can do differently. Our job is not to tell people how to spend their money. It's their money. They can do what they want. But our job is to give them good advice to help them build wealth. Again, that's the theme of Wealth Mavericks. The podcast is the secrets the wealthy know to build generational wealth.
Yeah.
And you don't do that by keeping up with the Joneses. Bob, as you were talking about, especially the cart before the horse and some of the conversations we've had recently, and I think this so applies to physicians. So I'd love for you to tell the story of a horse called Asset, because I think people can really understand that analogy well. So would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, one of the things that we try to do is try to use stories and analogies to teach lessons about finance and taxes and things that are what feel complicated or overwhelming if we've never been in that world. And so the horse called Asset is a story that I made up to help explain understanding. A lot of times we make decisions by putting the cart before the horse, or also just as important, not understanding the size of a cart that the horse can actually pull. Mm-hmm. So think about it. So we have a horse named Asset. So you're a farmer. And what do farmers do? They farm. And when their crops have grown, they harvest their crops. They throw their crops into the back of the cart. And the cart is always big enough for the horse that they have. Okay. And so this horse is called Asset. Okay. And so what the farmer is going to do is he's going to walk Asset to town to sell his harvest. Right. So he gets to town or starts going to town, and all of a sudden there's a dip in the road, and one of the wheels of the cart gets stuck because there's just enough weight in that cart that the horse, the Asset, can actually pull that cart until it falls into this dip. And it happens to be right in front of another farmer. And this other farmer happens to be right at the fence line, but he has some beautiful horses in his field. And this farmer sees our farmer, you, stuck. And so he said, hey, you need some help? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. He jumps over before we even answer yes. And he starts pushing the cart, and doesn't need to push hard, just enough for the Asset to get it out of that ditch. And so you continue on and you get to town, and what do? You sell your harvest, you make your money, right? Which is your revenue. And what do you do with revenue? Well, you got to go buy stuff. Right. So you have expenses. So farmers, what do they have to do? They have to get more seed for the next harvest, right? For the next planting season. They also have to get stuff for their lifestyle, right? They got to get flour for food, and they got to buy all these things so they can last until the next harvest. Okay.
Gotta go to the market and get some groceries.
Right. Go get some groceries, right? Why can't you do that? And so anyways, you go do that and you fill up your cart. And Asset has to take that cart back. And sure enough, what happens? Asset gets stuck right in that same little ditch. But this time, the farmer that helped is not strong enough to help push that cart out. There's just enough load in that cart that not only Asset could barely pull, but now that it's stuck in that groove, the farmer that helped before cannot help. So what does the farmer offer? he offers you the opportunity to rent or buy this other horse, one of his horses. So you buy another horse. So you buy another asset. So you have asset and asset 2.0. You hook up the second horse, excuse me, hook up the second horse, the second asset, and easily pulls that cart out of that, and you go back to your farm. And the moral of the story here is that if you think about it, a lot of times our cart is our expenses. That's our lifestyle. And there's points in time where our lifestyle meets our asset or our income, and it can no longer pull our expenses, our lifestyle. And so we have to get another job. We have to get another income stream. We have to get another asset. Okay. Or we cut our lifestyle. Okay. That's the option. The other thing is that, well, what if you bought the second horse before you even needed it? Well, you probably would have gone in the ditch, but would you have needed two assets to pull that cart? Probably not, because what would have happened? You probably would have loaded your cart up with enough expenses, right? We always kind of live to our income and then exceed it. It's the American way as consumers. And all of a sudden you're in a ditch. Now you got to buy a third asset or another income stream. And there's a point in time where people just can't do that. And they're stuck in a rut. And so how do we get unstuck? And that's the point that we're talking about. A lot of times, especially as physicians, because we felt in that mindset that we're behind the eight ball. I gave up a decade of my life to learn to become a physician. And now I hit the lottery, meaning I'm actually now in practice and I'm making some money. And I feel like I got to make up all these life events in an instant year or 2 years. Right. And all of a sudden I make decisions and I put the cart before the horse. And we were in the episode, we were talking about a client that a member we were talking to, and he had done that. He had put the cart before the horse, and the meaning that he was talking to a particular advisor, and that advisor was a hammer. His advice was not bad advice. He just didn't know our business owner member well enough to know, you know what? You need to wait to do this until you use this cash flow to build more revenue.
Right.
He wanted to be a hammer and nail that nail. Again, not bad advice, just bad timing. And our client didn't know that it was bad timing because he felt like he was behind the eight ball, and his desired goal was to have what? Tax savings. So now our conversation yesterday was, here's what my financial statement shows, but here's what my bank account shows.
Right.
I have a cash flow issue now.
Right.
And the conversation,
which is what we knew was going to be the case. I mean, this was we could project that. He just didn't know. And he didn't feel like he didn't know us well enough to say, yep, I'm going to abandon everything I was going to do and do this.
Right.
I think that's when we're talking about this, like having too many assets, pulling a cart is inefficient. It's like, how do you build efficiency in that? And I think especially when it comes to doctors, just like anyone else, it's this concept of keeping up with the Joneses. And, that phrase has been around for a long time because it's very true. So, you graduate medical school, you go through residency, all of a sudden you get this income, in your specialty or whatever you're doing, and you see all the other partners at the group. They're driving nicer cars, they have bigger homes. So then there's this temptation to, well, I need to spend at that level. I'm a doctor, I deserve it. So you start getting into a lot of deep psychology things here. Finally, like, I'm going to reward myself. I've been scrimping and saving. And so I think that's that overloading of that cart prematurely. And again, our job is not to tell people how to spend their money. It's their money. They can do what they want. But our job is to give them good advice to help them build wealth. Again, that's the theme of Wealth Mavericks. The podcast is the secrets the wealthy know to build generational wealth.
Yeah.
And you don't do that by keeping up with the Joneses.
And here's the thing. Your business is part of your wealth strategy. Your practice, your business is part of your wealth strategy. So there's a period in time you need to invest in your business so it yields enough cash flow to be able to do another strategy or another asset. Okay.
Hmm.
And a lot of times we forget that, especially if we're not looking at our business as a business. And so this is why we have a coaching side of our tax planning side, is because the coaching aspect of it and the mindset of running a business, we know most people have never been taught.
Right.
And so when you think about, let's just talk physicians and talk about your asset, your horse, your practice here and now. You feel like many times that you're behind the eight ball, or I'm going to put money into my 401k plan, my pension plan, and I'm going to focus, but I don't have access to that cash. That's for later on in retirement, right? And we can have discussions on the efficiency or the effectiveness of that in another conversation, another members only content. But let's look at here and now. You need access to capital. You want to grow your business. You need to grow your practice, or you feel like you're stuck. But then you also say, but if I grow my practice, I can only see so many more patients, right? And
Right.
because you're of this mindset that you're behind the eight ball, you're not making investments in your business. And what do I mean by that? How about having a nurse practitioner in your practice or a physician assistant in your practice? Well, what would I do with them? They're going to cost me money that I need to catch up my lifestyle or what
Hmm.
I've lost a decade of accumulating. No, no, no. Your business, your practice is your primary asset that's going to lead to that. So if you delay gratification for just another 2 years, think about that. 2 years compared to feeling like you have to keep catching up for 10 to 15 years, it's a big
Right.
difference. Now, why am I saying this? Because depending on your practice, how many patients do you have? If you looked at the list of patients you have and how many of those patients come in, so of course, this depends on your specialty, right? So imagine your list of patients. I know, Joe, myself, I do not go to an annual physical.
Right.
I don't make it a priority, but I also don't have a physician that calls me to make it a priority. My wife does, but it's like, yeah, whatever. You know what I
Right.
mean? And I
Yes.
don't mean it like that, but that's just the reality of it.
Hmm.
Right? So when a patient comes to your practice, to your business, what's the first thing they do? They pay a copay. They can't pay a copay if they're not there.
Right.
So if they're not getting a physical, and I'm just using this as an example,
Hmm.
but this is the understanding of running a business, is that the point I'm trying to make. That's a $30 cash or whatever their copay is. And then when they see somebody in the practice, there are charted codes that you're putting into your coding system that generates a bill to who? The insurance company, which creates revenue for the business, which pays for the nurse practitioner or the physician assistant who saw that patient, because that patient didn't need to see you, a physician. They're coming for a
Right.
physical.
And
Now,
this is a rethinking of the way business is done,
yes,
because and to the point that we made earlier about residency, like doctors are just absolute machines. I mean,
yes,
the fact that they can make it through residency with the hours and what's required builds up a tolerance to be able to work really, really hard.
yes,
And so I think, Bob, what you and I have seen, I mean, we have physician friends and clients that we and members, of what we do, and when we talked to them, we talked to one of them 2 meetings in a row. He had not gone home the night before. He slept at the office. He's just grinding. I mean, it's like, and there's 2 physicians that we know that we've had conversation with where that's the case. And it's because, again, sometimes it's because they got themselves in a difficult situation, so they have to dig themselves out. But what we're saying is, like, yes, hard work is great, but working hard and working smart is where there's a lot of power.
right.
So there are like structural things that you can do differently.
That's right. And a lot of times cash is just going in the wrong direction,
Hmm.
right? Because you don't know where cash should go. right? So imagine if in this example, and let's just say this is a family or a family doctor or even a pediatrician practice where they maybe have a lot of HMO practices and there's a lot of routine physical type checkups, annual checkups, that kind of stuff that need to occur. It's still revenue. It may not be as much revenue as you want, but it's still revenue. And so if you think about it as a physician, if you don't have to see every one of those patients, yes, but I care for my patients. Absolutely. You should care for your patients, which is why you should have somebody in your office calling patients who don't show up.
Caring for them.
You're caring for them. Caring for them doesn't mean that they need to see you. They need to know that you care for them. And
Mhm.
your practice is reaching out saying, you know what, Bob, it's been 3 years since you've come in for a physical.
Right.
Right. And I totally understand life gets crazy, but we have an opening next week at whatever time. I'm going to go ahead and put you in there. Does that work for you? Done.
Right.
That's what
Well,
sales organizations do.
and thinking, I mean, I think other areas of medicine like chiropractors and acupuncturists and massage therapy, they do
They
this.
do this.
Right. So
Dentists. Yep.
I remember the first time I went to a chiropractor, it was my back was just seized up. It was just very painful. I went in, the chiropractor, did their adjustments and all that kind of stuff. And then I remember, and this is the first time this had ever happened to me in the I'll call it the medical field, is later that night, I was literally at Costco with Mandy shopping, and my phone rang, and it was the chiropractor. And he called me and he was like, I just wanted to follow up and see how you're feeling. This is like maybe 4 or 5 hours after I had gone and seen him. That to me, that level of care, it made me feel cared for. So he did physically, help take care of me. He did his job. His job was done.
Yeah.
But that feeling of being cared for, like what is the feeling your patients get when they're in and around you? Who is it on your team who is taking the onus of responsibility and saying, we care for you? I
Yeah.
think that's a really interesting mindset perspective,
Yes.
shift.
Yes. And then that means you get more referrals because
Yes.
one of the things that I hear with family members, especially aging parents that we're dealing with right now, is that their number one gripe over the lifetime of seeing doctors, right? All of a sudden it's like, you are in front of me and I'm going to complain about every doctor I've had, even though you're not that doctor that I've had before, about
Right.
how I haven't been cared for.
Yes.
Right. And so they
And
come to you without thinking you caring for them unless you show that you care.
right. Unless you show that you care. I'll give you a really
Crazy.
specific example. And we're just going to say this is someone who I know. I don't want to give away anything, but someone who I know had open heart surgery. And that person, their cardiologist was unaware that the surgery had happened. So the cardiologist called just to set, or their appointment setter called to set up the next appointment. And this person was like, I just had the surgery. So I'm like, this disconnect in the medical field, like the bar physician, you got to understand the bar is so low for you. So when you just do these minor things, you stick out like the best thing that has ever happened in medicine. And it does take a little intention. Again, this is thinking like a business owner, not thinking like a doctor. Think like a business owner. How can I just level up what I'm doing in my practice? I promise you the tangible impact to your patients will be felt and appreciated. And to
Yeah.
your point, Bob, referrals go through the roof, and increasing your
Sure.
value,
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah. Yeah. One last anecdote was interesting. I have a doctor client in downtown LA, and they help at lower income at risk pregnancies. Excuse me.
Hmm.
And when I was meeting with her and talking with her and building out a plan, she would say, "Oh, in waiting room number two." I'm like, "What do you mean waiting room number two?" Because when I would go in the front door, there was always a waiting room right there.
Hmm.
I'm like, she's like, "Yeah, we have three waiting rooms." I'm like, "Wow." I said, "You're a busy practice." She said, "No, no, no." She said, "I have three waiting rooms because when patients come and they see more than three people sitting and waiting for me, they leave.
Oh, interesting.
So if I have a waiting room with two, another one with three, another one with one, that's more than three.
Right.
Three
But
of
they don't
those
feel
would
that
have
it is.
left.
Just the psychology of it.
That's right.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's brilliant. She did really well. And it was
Yes.
a Medicare practice because and Medi-Cal because it was low income, high risk pregnancy.
Right.
But she
That
understood the
so is
model.
that that patient who goes there, they basically walk in, they go, "This is too busy. I'm going to the other one," because they don't care. I mean, it's
Or they
basically what it
don't
is.
go.
Wow.
They don't go
Interesting.
because they're high risk pregnancies for a reason,
Wow.
right? And it's not because they jog every day and they eat the right foods.
Right.
They're low income. They're in a position to where they eat what they can. They don't take good care of themselves. They're pregnant, and there's a whole host of reasons. But she knew the psychology of her patients to understand how she needed to adjust her business model to protect her patients.
That's brilliant.
Right. And I've never forgotten that. I think it was such a smart shift.
Yes. You
And
know, this is an amazing story. I cannot remember. I think I first heard this story. It might have been in the E-Myth, in the book, The E-Myth. Highly, highly recommend for anybody, physicians, doesn't matter who you're, like, read E-Myth. It might have been him, or it might have been one of my other mentors. He talked about the story of Paddy Lund. Paddy Lund was an Australian dentist, and Paddy was like so fed up with life, he was like ready to end his life. Like that's where he got to. He was in a deep, dark place. And he had this moment of clarity, and it's like, what is it that's causing me to want to do this? And he realized like it all stemmed from his practice. I mean, dentists have a high suicide rate. You know, they're dealing with people in pain all day, every day. It's basically their job. I mean, I know there's a lot more to it, but it's like it's a difficult practice. You're hunched over, kind of like looking at, working fine motor skills. So all of that was like pressing on him. So he realized, I think I can make some changes in my practice that would allow me to enjoy life a little bit more. So he shut down the practice. I think it was for like 6 months. He remodeled the practice. He said, what are the things that people, when they come here, that they don't like? They don't like the sound of the drills going. You know, when you go to the dentist, you can always hear the drills going. That's like a deep human fear. Like, you're drilling my teeth, right? It's painful and all that. The smell of it. So he installed I think it was either a bread baking oven or like cookies or something. Like, he 24/7, he had pastries being created in his office. So that was the aroma that you were met with when you walked into
distraction.
Patty's office.
Yeah.
He gave his patients a key. So it was locked, and the sign on the front door said, "Not open to the public," because he was tired of dealing with the public. And so in order for someone to be a patient of his, they had to give him 2 referrals before they could even see him. So it's like he just said, I again, he got to the place where he's like, I'm willing to end my life over this. If I'm willing to do that, then I'm willing to make dramatic changes. I'm not advising that people do this, but an interesting way to go about doing things. So he would mail somebody their key, they would come in, they would let themselves in, they would be welcome with all this. So I think what you're talking about and what I'm trying to convey here is sometimes it does take thinking a little bit differently. Don't just push forward and grind for the sake of pushing forward and grinding. Take a moment and think about things. And if you need help thinking about this is what we're here for. We love helping you process this kind of stuff. So, work with your coach, work with your advisor, ask your questions on this page. We're here to help.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening to the podcast today. We hope that you enjoyed it and found value. As always, feel free to leave a comment or reach out to us and let us know what questions you have. We're happy to help in any way we can, and that's why we share this content. This is for you, so make sure to jump in the conversation and let us know how we can help.